Ever since the Australian Federal Police raided the offices of the ABC and News Corp journalist Annika Smethurst over a national security breach this year, Australian media companies have been in lockstep suggesting that the Australian government needs to do more to protect the freedom of the press and the anonymity of their sources. With 82 separate pieces of national security legislation enacted and passed by the Parliament since September 11, 2001, which is more than any other Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance country, we've now arrived at the point where journalists and whistleblowers alike are being criminalised for publishing pretty much anything the government decides is a secret. All of this negatively affects the ability of journalists and reporters to shine a light into corners that governments of all flavours traditionally keep in the dark. And we only know this because an intelligence officer leaked details of the Australian Signals Directorate, which is our version of the NSA, but military like the CIA, desires to operate on domestic soil against Australian citizens without warrants or judicial oversight in order to, quote, better support Home Affairs priorities, unquote. No operations here or overseas were compromised, no lives were put at risk. Home Affairs, you'll remember, is the super ministry created by bringing national security, law enforcement, emergency management, border control, immigration, refugees, citizenship, multicultural affairs, the whole lot under the control of one minister, Peter Dutton. This format gives one particular government minister a huge amount of executive power, even granting them the ability to bypass the Attorney General on issues that would normally require a legal check. Now, I'm actually inclined to take Peter Dutton, an ex-cop from that bastion of police integrity, Queensland, who supported the removal of basic human rights to gather peacefully under Campbell Newman's short-lived experiment, at his word when he claims to have had no knowledge or input into the recent actions of the AFP. Now, I have no doubt he would tick off on going after anyone that threatens to embarrass the government, and even him personally, but even as security super minister, he's not going to be running the day-to-day operations of every department in his portfolio. Unfortunately, for some, we're not at Pinochet levels of political persecution just yet. But highly publicised raids on a journalist and the aggressive pursuit of sources for publishing a factual, clearly evidenced story that's without a doubt in the public interest has certainly focused the world's attention on Australia's creeping government secrecy and conspicuous lack of a Bill of Rights. Even the United States, with all its deep state madness, has the basic rights essential to democracy like free speech, guaranteed in the nation's founding documents. Australia, no such protections. So once we elect someone, they can pretty much ride roughshod over everything we as Western citizens take for granted, no matter what they told us before the election. Yet for all the evidence that departmental secretaries, whose opinions can reasonably said to be right in line with strongman Dutton's, are seeking the power to proactively hack into and disrupt the cyber activities of Australian citizens with no accountability to the public, our opinion of journalists and the news media has sunk so low that conservatives in Australia are actually demanding the government take charge and jail anarchist outlaws like that Annika Smethurst. You see, I always assumed that a typical right-wing position would be putting all the available information straight out into the public domain with as few filters and redactions as possible, so that every individual has the equality of opportunity to paint their own picture of what's really going on. Any and every time you let the government filter information, you tilt reality towards totalitarianism until eventually you're in a country run by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, obviously, the realities and complexity of modern government prevent us from having unfettered access, but the proposition that we as individuals have the right to know as much as humanly possible about whatever our government's doing on our behalf is hardly left-wing. But that's the impression you get reading the comments on, for just one example, an article by George Williams in The Australian, writing that, quote, no one is safe when politicians decide what's news, unquote. He was promptly called another lefty university hack who stands by and watches right of centre speakers closed down. Apparently, the straw man argument is a favourite of those on the right. Not only is freedom of the press apparently a big government leftist proposition, publishers should be punished as well as the whistleblowers who breach their public service contracts by serving the public. Raid them and get them behind bars. After all, the Conservatives are more than happy for the cabinet of our elected peers to determine what is top secret. No, this isn't the People's Daily, it's the Australian, the local paper of Parliament House. It's a Murdoch publication, so I'm pretty sure these comments aren't coming from a horde of student unionists. No one questions the tightening of security laws. No one gives a stuff about knowing secret material. What we want to know is that our lives are safe. I mean, not only do I question these nominal Liberal Party supporters' commitment to the individual liberties on which the right-wing party was founded, it feels like ScoMo's quiet Australians want nothing more than to plug into a shit version of the Matrix where we're all free to be economic slaves wrapped in cotton wool. Most people on the streets support the AFP raids, no matter how innocuous the leaked information might have been. I mean, this is truly terrifying stuff. This sentiment gives any government with a tough on X agenda the right to keep any politically embarrassing information a secret, because anything that embarrasses the government or its members would mar its tough appearance. And knowing that there's a tribal base who will support someone like Peter Dutton's every move, as long as it comes with the thinnest guise of national security implications, can only embolden him to more and more ruthlessly target anyone who threatens his agenda. Our last Labor government actually tried to regulate and define the truth in the media, and now the party of the individual, of freedom, that so desperately wanted to abolish Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act because it impinged on our freedom of speech, has flipped and decided that it too knows what you can and can't talk about when it comes to unelected and broadly unaccountable government agencies using their military capabilities domestically, for the first time ever, to spy on Australian citizens. I mean, how is this not a slightly bigger priority than Andrew Bolt being able to claim you're not Aboriginal because your skin's too pale? Now look, as I said before, even staunch civil libertarians like myself don't necessarily expect unfettered access to government information. I don't even have an in-principle objection to this specific communication being classified in the first place, but it's public domain now, and going after anyone and everyone who touched it, destroying the ability of journalists to guarantee the confidentiality of their sources, and threats of jail from senior bureaucrats are explicitly designed to scare other journalists off publishing similarly damning stuff. And denying the obvious public interest in knowing our domestic spy agencies wanted to follow the NSA's lead and remove our right to private communication it's just ridiculous, especially for anyone who believes in small government. So support the Right to Know campaign, because whether you love them or hate them, these journalists are the only ones who can consistently keep our governments on their toes. If you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide, is how we should treat the government we elected on our behalf, not the other way around.
The tax office can take money directly out of people's accounts, but you're not allowed to know. The elderly are being abused and neglected in nursing homes, but you're not allowed to know. The government can raid journalists for reporting the truth if it says you're not allowed to know. It couldn't happen in Australia. It's happening now. When the government hides the truth from you, what are they covering up?